It's the 11th century BC on the bank of Britain's longest river, and the soldiers could see the fear in the girl's eyes as they bound her wrists. They could hear the horrified murmurs of the crowd that had gathered, but they could also feel the intense glare of their queen. They attached the rocks, led the girl down to the water's edge, and threw her in. In Welsh, Hafren; in Latin, Sabrina; and English, the Severn. 3 names for the same stretch of water. But how did it get these names? And why does one explanation begin with a princess thrown into a river? Sometime around 1136, Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote what ended up being known as the Historia Regum Britanniae, the history of the kings of Britain. It's a rather dubious 2,000-year history of the kings of Britain, starting with the supposed first king, Brutus of Troy, the great-grandson of a Trojan war hero who settles on an island inhabited by giants. After swiftly defeating the giants, he names the island after himself, Britannia. He also gives the sticky-out bit at the bottom to his buddy Coroneus, because he chucked the last giant off a cliff. But that's a story for another time, and we now call that bit Cornwall. According to Geoffrey, Brutus died, and Britain was divided between his 3 sons. Camber took Wales, Albinactus took Scotland, and his eldest Locrinus inherited England. But not long into their reigns, the Huns invaded Scotland, led by King Humber. Albinactus was killed, and so his brother set out to avenge him. They drove Humber's forces into a river, where he promptly drowned, and Geoffrey now says that river took his name. While divvying up the spoils, Locrinus frees a young woman named Estraldis, a beautiful princess that Humber had kidnapped in Germania. And despite already being promised to Gwendolen, daughter of Coroneus, he promptly falls in love. However, he still marries Gwendolen, presumably not to get on the wrong side of a man that can chuck giants off cliffs, but he sets Estraldis up in a cave hidden beneath London, because nothing says I love you quite like, hey honey, I've dug you a hole to live in. And for the next 7 years, they keep up their secret affair, and they have a daughter, Hafren. When Coroneus finally pops his giant lobbing clogs, Locrinus promptly dumps Gwendolen and makes Estraldis his new queen. As you can probably imagine, Gwendolen didn't take this particularly well. She returned to Cornwall, raised an army, and then meets Locrinus in battle, where he ends up receiving the pointy end of an arrow. With the king dead, she seizes the throne, and in a final act of revenge, Estraldis and Hafren are captured, weighted down with rocks, and thrown into the river to drown. And here Geoffrey gives the explanation for the river's name, that in memory of her former husband's daughter, Gwendolen declares that throughout the land, the river should be known as Hafren. This becomes corrupted in Latin to Sabrina, later Hafren in Welsh, and eventually Severn in English. The trouble is, the river's name seems to be older than the story explaining it. Sabrina and Hafren appear in older forms long before old Geoff wrote down his version. And what we don't find before Geoffrey is any solid reference to a princess named Hafren. So the more likely explanation is that he built a dramatic origin story around a name that already existed, or possibly expanded on older Celtic stories surrounding the river itself. These days, the Historia Regum Britanniae is considered to be about as historically accurate as an Assassin's Creed game. And even though some of his peers at the time raised an eyebrow at his history, it was taken quite seriously for centuries. It helped shape how Britain imagined its own past, and it gave it an origin that was connected to classical Greek history, which certainly sounded better than Isidore of Seville's suggestion that it came from the word bruti, because it was an island of brutes and savages. But Hafren's story didn't end with Geoffrey. Later writers added to it. Milton's Comus, he writes of the guiltless damsel fleeing the mad pursuit of the enraged stepdame, and how after being lobbed into the river, she undergoes an immortal change, becoming goddess of the river. And like the many tributaries that feed the Severn, her story too has been fed by other strands of lore, which kind of wind their way through Anglo-Celtic culture. And just as the river runs through the Welsh marshes, a place that's neither fully Welsh nor fully English, Hafren too can be said to habit 2 worlds, the living and the dead, or the land and the water. In Welsh, Hafren can also be linked to the concept of a boundary. Perhaps Hafren's fate could be read as a kind of personification of the river itself, a figure caught between two places, belonging fully to neither of them. In reality, the name also seems to carry older connections to the Old English and Norse words for the rushes that grow at the water's edge, as well as the old word for seafarer, all terms that were already in use long before Geoffrey. So while Geoffrey may not have preserved the true origin of the name, he certainly gave us an enduring legend. And rivers invite story, they shape landscapes, and they divide kingdoms that outlast almost everything built beside them. They're too important to be just another name on a map, so people gave this one a past, a spirit, and a story that matches its physical nature, and one that has lasted for hundreds of years. So whether Hafren existed or not probably doesn't really matter. While the river endures, so will she.